Hi, and welcome to our webinar series. You will watch now a record of our webinar on local content for foreigners supplier. With the new regulation in Brazil, it is possible now to build a FPSO abroad and still have Brazilian local content, as long as you manage to import some parts from Brazilian suppliers. You will have two of our Brazilian experts on local content regulation in this webinar. Tay will address all this and more. But before you start, please, don't forget to like, share, and comment on this video. This will help us keeping producing these contents for you. Also, subscribe to our YouTube channel, and don't forget to click on that bell icon to get regular updates on our new videos. Enjoy!
I'm Luis, the head of RDNA Consult. Despite the consult in the name, we are mainly a certification body. Next, Marina, please. We've been working with local content certification since the beginning in 2010. Actually, the first local content certificate issued ever was from us to an Argentinian company established in Brazil. Since then, we issued more than 25,000 certificates, becoming the leading certification body in Brazil. Our focus is on ESG certification, that is environmental, social, and governance certification. Local content belongs to the S of the ESG initiatives, but we also do other certifications as well, such as ES certification, ESPS code, anti-bribery certification. Next, Marina, please. Well, you know the saying, the shoemaker's son always goes barefoot. We do not believe in that. So if we intend to be a certifier body focused on ESG, we must do our homework too. So these are some examples of how we try to turn our customers' trust into benefits for society. We did this hospital ship together with the non-profit organization Terre des Hommes, that is a Dutch NPO for health care. They did all the hospital part of the ship, and we contributed with the maritime part. Like, they came with this idea, because they have those pregnant women in the riverside community, and they came with this idea to have like a GPS watch, a bracelet with GPS, so they would know where they are when they are about to deliver. And then we came with this concept of, a very fast boat, an ambulance boat, like we call it and boat lens, that would come out from the hospital ship, would go where the pregnant woman were, because we would know with the GPS bracelet. So we pick her up, bring her back to the hospital, and then she would deliver in a delivery room, and with this we achieved like zero fatality, during the delivery time, and that was very nice. And so these are some of the things that actually we like to share with our customers, because they are the one that make it possible for us. Next, Marina. But today we're here to talk about the changes happening in the local content policy in Brazil and how this affects suppliers abroad and in Brazil as well. So we have two heavyweights here, Marina and Guilherme. Marina is the associate in charge of complex certifications. She's a petroleum engineer who has lived all over the world. I think the last place you were, Marina, you were an expat in Alaska, if I'm not mistaken. So anyway, yes. She knows the business. And Guilherme is also a petroleum engineer with a solid experience with FPSO projects, in charge of some of FPSO certifications going on right now in the company. So I think you are in very good hands. The way we'll do it, Marina will do the presentation, while Guilherme and I will gather all the questions you have in the chat. Then we will address the questions at the end of the presentation. Marina's presentation is divided into three parts. First, she will talk very briefly about how we got here. I mean, the legislation, how this evolves to what we have today. Then she will also talk very briefly about the definitions and the formula, just so we are all in the same level, in the same page. And then she goes to the fun stuff, to the fun stuff that is, she'll show us some case studies, like practical case studies of import and export while keeping the local content, and how you can do it and how you can interact with Brazilian companies, and even if you are building something abroad and selling to a shipyard abroad. So then we go to those case studies, and then at the end we'll address all the questions in the chat, and this is it. So I hope we'll have a pleasant 1 hour together here. So Marina, whenever you're ready, the floor is yours. So go ahead.
Thank you, Luis. Thank you all for joining us again. As Luis said, I will start just explaining a little bit about the local content bid rounds and the local content supply chain, which is very important to understand why you need to get a local content certification, okay? So basically, we have 3 scenarios here for the local content commitment for an FPSO. The first one is when the operator signs a contract with ANP from the 7th to the 13th bid round, which is the local content commitment table. As you can see, it's a huge table described here on this slide. And the second scenario is the resolution 726, which the operators signed basically an amendment, a contract amendment with ANP that replaced that huge table with these items: engineering, machine and equipment, and CIA that we called on the market. It's a very common scenario. Nowadays, the metal field, for example, use this on the FPSO construction, has this commitment. And the third scenario, as we can see, it's going to be very common on a near future, because it's going to be the future rounds, even for the production share and the 14th round forward. It's a global local content, which is a 25% local content. It's a less local content, but it's not easy to reach once the FPSO is being constructed abroad. But how the operator can reach this local content? How they can evidence to ANP why it's important to have a local content certification? Because the local content certification is the proof that they invested in Brazil. This is the requirement of ANP. So this is basically the local content supply chain. So the operator signs the contract with ANP, and they move their local content commitment through their suppliers. They have, of course, their commercial strategy, but what we see on the FPSO development, for example, is that they replace but they move their commitment, for example, the 25% to the EPCI, and for the local content commitment. So the EPCI has to deliver the local content certificate to the operator. So what the EPCI do? They ask for their suppliers a local content certificate, of course, based on the procurement strategy inside the company. And therefore, their supplier asks for the local content certificate of their subvendors. And this is the local content supply chain. RBNA is involved in all the chain, because we have to certify all the suppliers, all the subvendors, and the EPCI, of course. And at the end, the operator will deliver to ANP the local content report. That's why it's very important to have the local content certification. Otherwise, the operator will not be able to to evidence this to the agents, to the regulatory agents here in Brazil. Moving forward, I will explain a little bit about the definition of the methodology of the resolution ANP 19. The resolution 19 is the methodology of the Brazilian suppliers, how they get the local content certification. It's important to highlight here that it's only for the Brazilian suppliers, not for the foreign ones. I will get to the foreign suppliers, but the definitions are basically the same ones. So first of all, we have 5 definitions. We have materials, which are basically the, for example, base plates for the skids, washers, pins, connectors, all that are materials. We have services that are contracts with manpower only. For example, engineer contracts, technical advisors. We have goods, which are pumps, valves, delivery of these equipments. For example, system, which is the FPSO itself, their modules. It can be also the onshore rigs, offshore rigs, the construction of these equipments, okay? And we have the methodology of SET, which is basically the use of equipment and the labor service itself. For example, the charter of the FPSO or the charter of the onshore rig or the supply vessel operation, okay? We have these 5 methodologies. It's important that these methodologies are also applicable for the 809 resolution with some difference that I will state here in a bit, okay? Now, the 809 resolution that applies for foreign supply. The main difference here is that the set and service for foreign supply are not able to be certified, not yet anyway, because it's being discussed, okay, by ANP on the local content, on the ANP public consultation. I'm sure most of you here today are aware of that is being discussed. We don't have any definition yet, but from now, the main difference between the set and service between ANP 19 and ANP 809 is that a foreign set or service cannot be deducted. Other difference is that the material here will become a good only based on the methodology, because they will be certified as a good once they become a foreign supply, okay? So now I will enter a little bit on the deduction methodology. The deduction methodology, when we see the formula, this equation, we get a little bit scared, but actually it's simple than that. The deduction formula, it's basically the sum of all your Brazilian share, which is all your supplies that has local content certificate, okay, over your sales price. So your sales price will be your sales equipment or your sales of your system, your module or your FPSO. Of course, now if the FPSO doesn't have a final sales price, it's also being discussed with ANP on the local content public hearing the next few months. But basically, this is the deduction methodology, okay? It's simple, it's simplest than the equation says, okay? We have some highlights here on this methodology. As I mentioned before, is that all the Brazilian supplies must be certified individually. For example, if you are a foreign supply of a generator and you purchase a pump from Brazil, and if you purchase a motor from Brazil, this motor must be certified individually using the resolution 19. As I stated before, the resolution 19 is for Brazilian suppliers, not the resolution 809, okay? So if you have a gen set, for example, and you purchase one generator from Brazil and one motor from Brazil, each one of them must be certified individually, even if it's the same supplier. They must be certified individually, okay? Another highlight here that is very important is that all the sub-supply levels that will be included on the final equipment that is a foreign supply must be certified. Not only the final one, but all of them. Because this is very important, because even if your supply states that they have local content, if they don't deliver to you a local content certificate, at the end, I will not be able to use the deduction formula because they don't have a local content certificate. That's why it's very important that you request to your supplier to deliver to you a local content certificate. As I highlight earlier on the local content supply chain, everyone on the chain needs to deliver a local content certificate, okay? One thing that I believe most of you that I already discussed this methodology is that the value of the local content in BRL, which means reais, remains unchanged throughout the local content supply chain. So it will be certified primarily the Brazilian supply, and at the last level of the foreign supply, the value will remain the same. So if the Brazilian supply has 50 reais, for example, your last level of supply, for example, your foreign supply of the motor that is selling to the FPSO, for instance, will also have 50 reais of local content, no matter what's the price of the equipment, okay? I will highlight again here that all sub-supplies level must have a local content certificate, because only then we can have them deduct, we can use the equation, otherwise we will not be able to use that. This is very important, okay? That's why I highlight a lot of times here. So this is very important, okay? One thing that's for information, that once you receive your local content certificate, you should be able to see on the document is that the exchange rate that RBNA Consult use on the local content certificate will be described on the document. And also the local content certificate will be bound to one of these documents. We will bound to an invoice, a PO, or the contract. One of these documents will be on the local content certificate, okay? Now, I will explain a little bit the case studies that I brought here to clarify the resolution, because it's important to have numbers to understand better how to apply the equation of the resolution 809. To summarize the equation and the methodology, I brought here the possible cases, okay? As I explained before, from foreign supplies, we have two possible cases now. The first of them are the system ones, which are the module, for instance, the FPSO, and also the good, okay, which are motors, generators, skids, for example, the CO2 skids, the treatment water package. All of these, if they are built abroad, they can be deducted from the FPSO. The ones that cannot be deducted are set and service, even if they have local content. If they are foreign, they cannot be deducted. And of course, if the foreign supply hires a Brazilian supplier with local content, they will have to certify based on the resolution 19 of 2013. The first case study that I brought here is the system one. We are going to use a module that is being constructed to be delivered to the FPSO, okay? So let's suppose that this vendor hired 2 suppliers in Brazil, one for a motor and the other one for a service, let's say engineer service, okay? The motor delivered 60% of local content and the engineer delivered 100% of local content. So at the end, the vendor of the module, let's say, let's say the water treatment module, okay? It has a 7 million local content in BRL, okay? And the module is being sold by 8 million. I know that's not a real number, and you all know, of course, but just to make easier to do the equation, okay? So in local content, we have 7 million BRL, okay? And the module is being sold by $8 million. It's important to state here that the invoice in all currencies must be converted to BRLs. So here we converted with exchange rate of 5, just to make it easier, okay? And we have the invoice in BRL of 40 million reais, all right? So at the end, we apply the equation and we have 7 over 40. Now the module will have 17.5%. It's important here to see that the module itself won't have 60% and won't be applied the 60% or 100% of the delivered local content, okay? The value of the local content that will be applied for the Brazilian supplies, not the index. That's the important thing here, okay? For the second case study, I brought the good, which is the second scenario that is possible to be deducted from the foreign supply. What we have here is that the supplier of a genset, for example, purchased also a motor on the value of 10 million BRL, also delivered a 60% of local content. The main important thing here is that we cannot deduct a service from a good, okay? It's not possible to deduct a service. So if you are delivering a good, if you are delivering an equipment to an FPSO that is being built abroad, even if you hire a service here in Brazil, it's not gonna be accounted as local content, okay? So it's very important to keep this in mind, because we cannot deduct that. So moving on, we have this 6 million BRL in local content and 40 million BRL as a sales price. We use the same numbers just to see the difference of local content, okay? So at the end, applying the equation, you have 15% of local content. You can see here that the value of local content at the end will remain the same, okay? Some highlights here for these local content states. The ones for the resolution 19, which is the Brazilian supply here, we use the examples for the motor and the service. We need to use the invoice in Brazil, which is called nota fiscal. I'm sure most of you are aware of this document, okay? They are issued in reais, and the resolution 19 states that we need to use this document, so that we used to deliver the local content certificate based on a document with a BRL transaction, okay? If the PO is in BRL, in most of cases aren't, so that's why it's probably gonna be the nota fiscal, okay? So we need to use that. That's why sometimes the local content certificate for our equipment can take longer, because the PO is in other currency, and then it needs to wait for the nota fiscal to be issued to deliver the local content certificate, okay? Another thing that's very important here is that when we are certifying a Brazilian supplier, they are tax deducted. So an equipment or a service, they are tax deducted. So for example, if you are selling engineering service, they have the ISS. So it will be the final value of the nota fiscal minus the value of the ISS, okay, which is the service tax here in Brazil. And also the exchange rate used to convert here the currency, it's from the Central Bank of Brazil. It's similar to the Fed in US. So it's going to be on the local content certificate here, as I mentioned before, once we deliver based on the 809 resolution. As I mentioned throughout this presentation, okay, ANP, public consultation, is under the table right now. So we have three main points here that is going to affect probably the FPSO construction and also some of the suppliers. One of them is the Y value of systems without the commercial transaction. That's how the ANP call. For example, when you have a FPSO that is chartered, not sold, we don't have a transaction document, transaction commercial document, I'm sorry. So that's not explicit on the resolution. So basically nowadays we don't have, they don't have a Y value yet for this type of system, but it's being discussed. Also, it's being discussed what's going to determine which resolution to be used, for the 19 or the 809. So what is the minimum activity performed in Brazilian territory? Of course, some of equipment or system modules or FPSO don't have this need because they don't hire anything here in Brazil. But there are some cases, maybe in the future, that they will have this type of activities performed, or even contracts in Brazil that they need this definition that we don't have yet, the market don't have yet. So it's also being discussed. And the last one, but not least important, is that the possibility to deduct the foreign service and sets that I mentioned throughout the presentation, that now it's not possible to deduct this type of service and sets, even if they have local content, because the resolution 809 did not predict that type of methodology, but it's also being discussed. The ANP, the regulatory agency here in Brazil, did not publish the date of the public hearing yet, but it's probably going to be in the next few months. and I'm sure you are all looking forward to hear that. But this is going to be very important points to be discussed here, and yeah, that's it. That's very important. I'm sure the market is very hit to hear all these points from the public consultation. So that's it. Thank you a lot for hearing me. And now Luis will join me on the questions.
We have,
Okay.
thank you, Marina. Thank you very much. It was very good. Actually, it's Guilherme that will join you, but I'm here, looking, we have received 3 questions on the chat, open chat. I received 2 questions on the private chat, so we have 5 questions here, but we'll follow like the order. So the first one was, I'll have a comment, very nice comment from Renato. Thank you, Renato. Thank you very much. And then Tinius has the first question here. Local content certificates for serial goods normally don't state any fiscal documents like the nota fiscal and all that. And how to proceed in this case to get them acknowledged?
Okay. When we are certifying a good for a foreign supply, it needs to be stated which is your client. So basically, for the serial goods, we are not going to have this case because you will have a foreign customer. So you have to have an individual certificate for this good, for this equipment.
So you cannot use the serial certificate.
Yeah, you cannot use this certificate. Okay, so it's a need, as I mentioned on the presentation, it's an individual certificate. So you have to issue a certificate that will be bound to the nota fiscal or to your client abroad.
Excellent. And Guilherme, if you want to join in anytime, you just join, okay? Okay. I go to the next question here is from Amaury. So profit, if any, is not captured under local content as your nominator. Is Brazilian cost and denominator is price including profit? Is that correct? Maybe I didn't get the question. Maybe
I didn't get.
Amaury, if you want to open your
mic. I can explain further. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. Good morning for you and good evening for some of the others. Just the question is, when you showed your example just before, which was reaching 17.5%, if I recall well, of local content, the way we reach 17.5%, if I'm not wrong, is by taking the Brazilian costs. All right. Yeah, that's this one, 7 million BRL, and divide this by not a cost but by a price. Correct? A price meaning inclusive of profit. So applying this mechanism, you basically declare that there is no local content associated with your profit, because else your denominator should be your cost. Is that correct?
Yeah, for example, yes, for if you are certifying a Brazilian supplier, basically, for example, on the 10 million reais for the good, all your indirect costs, let's say that, will be already local content, okay? But if you are certifying a foreign abroad, this module that is being built abroad, the 40 million, all your costs that we are not going to measure, that is not local content, is already imported. So yes, your profit, it's not, the 40 million, it's not your cost, it's your price that is basically imported, it's all imported, and we are going to deduct the local content that you reach. So it's basically everything it's imported. Your cost, your price, that is the 40 million. It's all included in your sales price, okay? I'm not sure if I answered your question.
Yeah, basically what my point was is that the 40 million might not be your cost. Your cost might be 30 million, let's say. The 10 millions are profit. All right. So basically, if we were doing 7 million over 30 millions, You know what I mean? That will be a higher local content because we will consider the profit as part, if you want, of the local content. But here, the 10 million profit are in the denominator, but are not captured in the nominator, which makes the percent, right?
Yeah.
So consequently, if you have, yeah.
No, yeah, but your profit is not going to, your cost here on the foreign is not going to be measured, only your price.
Correct, that's what I'm saying, yeah. And your price is considered, what you call it, abroad and not Brazil in that case.
Exactly, exactly.
Okay, clear.
I think Marie has a very good point, and then there is a question that they sent to me in the private that it has to do with this one. I think Marina and Guilherme, it's if a foreigner equipment supplier hires a national supplier, will this national equipment have the same percentage of local content in the calculation of the final equipment? So I think maybe the question is a little bit similar, like, okay, you bought something in Brazil for a price with the local content, and then you resell it. So how does it work with the local content? I mean, because we have a profit on this, you know, you bought this pump, like you said, for example, for 10,000 and you sold it for 20,000, but there was like, let's say 50% local content in this 10,000. How this works, I mean, for the local content?
The index won't be the same as for example, here, is the good. The question that you read, Luis, is about the equipment, right? So I just moved for a new example. The index won't be the same because you will probably sell with some profit or other costs that you may have abroad. So basically, for example, the 809, 2 years ago, because the 809 was defined on 2020. So 2 years ago, it wasn't possible to have local content on a foreign supplier. Let's say this way. So everything was imported. But now, at least you can certify, but all your margin, all your profit won't be local content because it's not being built here in Brazil. So that's about the politics of the local content. So yes, as I mentioned, the value of the local content will remain the same, but the index won't be the same because probably we'll have a difference of the final sales price between the one that you bought here in Brazil and the one that you are selling abroad. So that's why the index won't be the same.
Excellent. We have another question here. Exchange rates to be stated on the certificates will be of which date? Contract signature date, PO date, or certificate issue date?
Yeah, good question.
It's from, I didn't mention the name, I'm sorry. Didn't give the credits. It's from Tinius.
Okay, good question actually, because the resolution doesn't say which one we should use. It says that it should be one or other. So we sometimes it's probably going to be the PO or the contract because are the ones that is issued primarily because the invoice sometimes sometimes it's from milestones, so they issue a lot of invoices, and basically from the cases that we've seen, it's from the PO or the contract because are the first documents to be issued. But the resolution doesn't define which one should be. It should be or invoice or PO or contract. So that's it.
Excellent. So we have some more questions here, and we still have 20 minutes. So let's go. We have a question from Claudio. 25% local content for FPSO actually means that the sum of all local content of all suppliers divided by the sales price, correct? The minimum local content request for each system or good is actually defined by the EPC, right? You can read it in the chat as well.
Okay. The first question is 25%. The first
For an
question.
FPSO.
Perhaps I can clarify, Marina. My point is for the
Mhm.
next FPSOs, we are considering 25% local content, right? And that's for the global local content of that FPSO. But it means the sum of all local contents of all suppliers. So the minimum local content is actually defined by the EPC, right? It can be for a system, they can demand 60% to compensate for the other parts that they cannot achieve local content, correct?
Yeah, because for example, the 25% is the minimum that they must, actually the 25% is from the operator needs to achieve. So basically the operator will pass to the AP to the FPSO construction, the APCI and then they will do the procurement strategy to reach. So yes, they can do this. They can hire a module with 60% or equipment, but this will depend on the procurement strategy.
Okay, got it. Thank you very much.
And if I may add, Marina, I think there are three methodologies for FPSO. So because they have the old contracts, when they have all the lines for all the equipments and projects and everything, and then there is no, I mean, there's no margin to negotiate. You have to, you know, each line has a required local content, but those are old contracts. And then you have the contracts that were like changed to have only 40%, 40%, and 40% for engineering and construction, everything. And then you have those those new contracts that are the 25%. Then it's 25% like globally. And then you can, like you said, it depends on the strategy of the EPCI. But one thing I want to highlight here in the questions of Claudio is that if I understood right, Claudio, you say the local content will be like the sum of all the local content costs divided by the sales price. But that's the thing, since it's like a charter contract, you know, it's a leasing contract, so there is no sales price. And this is the discussion that they're having in the Brazilian oil and gas agency right now. How do you to have the total cost of the FPSO since there is no sales price? But very good. And then I go to the next question here. It's from, then we have the private question, but the last public question here is from Karizal. How we determine the local content certificate percentage for good and sub-suppliers?
I'm not sure if I got the question.
No, we need to calculate the local content percentage for goods and its sub-suppliers. But Kaisal, if you want to open your mic as well, and as you wish. I think Marina, what we're saying is like, okay, you buy a good. You can have this good that is manufactured in Brazil or manufactured abroad. If the good is manufactured in Brazil, then we have to follow Resolution 19, and to calculate the local content of this good is actually it's like actually how Claudio was saying. You know, you take all the imported costs, divide by the sales price of the good. FPSO, we don't have sales price because it's leasing contract, but we have sales price for goods. And then you take the imported cost, divide by the sales price, and then there you have your local content. And then if you have, like, let's say an engine, that's good, but the engine is buying parts from other sub-suppliers, then they have to do the same thing, you know. But if you are abroad, then you change the resolution, you go to resolution 809. Then what you do is you the other way around. You have the
local content over the sales price.
Yeah, exactly. But you instead of deducting the imported cost when you're building abroad, you deducted the national cost, like the Brazilian cost. So you're building this engine abroad, and then you buy parts from Brazil. Those parts, they have local content, so you can deduct those the cost of those parts from your engine, and there you have your local content. But you have to remember that you have to ask those Brazilian suppliers that are selling these parts to you to give you a local content certificate, because the only way to deduct these parts is with the local content certificate. I think that's what he meant. And
it was Faisal that asked.
No, it was. I'm sorry for the mispronunciation, but Carazal Othman. But he said that yes, he said that there was his question.
Okay, good. Okay,
so
good.
Then we have 2 more questions in the private here. One is, let me read it here. On a contract where we have 3 local content from our Brazil sub-supplier, can these 3 local content combine into 1 local content to our Brazil clients? So I think it's like, can you combine local content certificates? Like you have like 3 sub-suppliers from Brazil, you're building something abroad, like a module, and then you have sub-suppliers in Brazil, you have 3 of them. Could you just combine these in 1 certificate, if I understood right?
As I said, you have to certify them individually, and then you have to certify your supply, like to sum up their suppliers and use the equation of deduction. I'm not sure if I explained your question, but you cannot combine all the suppliers into 1 certificate in Brazil. You will combine them once we use the equation of the local content deduction to certify your equipment or your module, okay? But the Brazilian suppliers, they need to be certified individually. So each equipment must be certified individually. Each service must certified per contract, for instance. It cannot be combined into 1, okay?
Yeah, very good. I think one thing that should be good to explain is that in Brazil, you have, every company has what we call like the tax off number, tax off register. I think this is everywhere in the world. Here we call it CNPJ. That's the name. And then this CNPJ is unique for each company, and every certificate has to be linked to this number, right, Marina? So you cannot have like 2 companies with 1 certificate, at least not from my knowledge here. I don't think so, but you are the expert. So anyway, and then we have a question here from Kenneth as well. Congratulations with this session, RDM team. Thank you, Kenneth. A question relevant for new contracting models used by Petrobras. How do you determine the FPSO value in build operated transfer? That means
BOT.
BOT contracts as opposed to EPC or lease and operating contracts for an on FPSO he's talking about.
If I'm not mistaken, Ken, the BOT, the FPSO will be sold to Petrobras. So if I'm not mistaken, because I didn't see, I didn't see yet this type of contract. Okay, it's a new thing for Petrobras. But if I'm not mistaken, P79, it's a BOT contract. So it's going to be sold eventually. So it will have a price for the FPSO. So basically, it's a system with a price. If I'm not mistaken.
Well, yeah, thanks, Marina. I think it's. I haven't seen the contractor model, so I don't know the detail of it. But there is an element of a fixed price, but also a period of fees that are being paid on a monthly or a regular basis that are possibly not included in the lump sum price of the asset, the remaining value of the asset at the moment of transferring the ownership from the foreign FPSO owner to Petrobras. For those, so it's basically a mix between an EPC and a lease and operate contract with a limited period, right? And that's a model that we'll see being brought to market more in the future is the expectation. So perhaps something you could reflect on.
Yeah, I know that I'm quite sure that P79 is this module, this BOT. I know that the transfer to Petrobras, it's like sometime between when the production begins, but there is a sales price, but I didn't see the contract yet, so I can't give you a certainty on how we can use like the Y value. I think that's your question, right? But
yes, indeed, yeah, the Y value could be one of the
probably
the Y
it
value.
will be some. Yeah, if in the future, if it's probably will be something very common if it works. And then probably we need to discuss this with the agency if it's necessary, because it's new. So everything that's new, there are a lot of things to be clarified. So yes.
Okay, thank you.
No, thank you, Kenneth. I miss you. I'm waiting you to come to visit us in Brazil so we can have a beer together. Very good point. And then just to clarify, the Y that Kenneth and Marina is talking about is the sales price that you have like for the good for a service. But in the case of the FPSO, there's a discussion because we're not selling the FPSO, so it's a leasing contract. So how you will determine the Y? I mean, this is a big discussion going on with the regulation body. But there's going to be a public hearing. We still don't have an answer for that. And then we have two more questions here, Marina, and I think we have time for them. So one is, do you know which future FPSO contracts will have local content requirements? That's a good question, the $1 million question. So the next FPSO contracts, they will have local content requirements.
I hope all of them.
No, but the thing is,
no.
What we have to think.
Go ahead.
No, yeah. So what you have to keep in mind is that the local content requirement is not for the FPSO; it's for the oil company when they sign a contract, for the exploration and development of production phase of a field. Then this is like a 30 years old contract. It's going to last like 30 years, if they declare commerciality and they decide to explore and if they find oil in this field. So let's say that Petrobras, let's take Petrobras, they go to a bid and they won a block in this bid, and then they commit to local content, and then they will do all the exploration phase and everything, and they'll find oil, and then they will start building the FPSO. So it's like 3, 4, 5 years after they win the bid that they will start building this FPSO. So the FPSO that we are seeing now on the contract, they are from bid like way in the past, so they all have local content requirement because Petrobras and the other oil companies, they had local content requirement. The bids that are to come, they still have local content requirements of 25% local content for FPSO. So my guess would be that in the next 5 to 10 years, we'll still have local content requirement for those FPSOs.
I know that there is a estimative for P80, P81. I think it's for, I believe it's for Búzios. That is 25%, and they will have local content. P81, I believe, they will have. I think I'm not sure if it's going to be this year, but the common I forgot the word, but probably what's going to be in the future is that most of the FPSO will have local content.
Of 25%.
Of 25%, yes.
One last question. We have time for one last question because we received in the private here. So I'm not saying the name of those questions in private because I don't know, people send it in private, so maybe they want me to say their name. But the question here is, why can't I deduct service from good? Why can't I deduct service from service? I think what they meant is, okay, you are building a module abroad, and then you hire like a Brazilian engineering company, like to design, to do some calculations, some CFD calculation or whatever. Then you can deduct this from the price of the module, and then you have local content in this module, even if you bought some service, you did it abroad, but you bought some service in Brazil. But if you're an engineering company, like a service company abroad, or if you are, let me see the question again. Why can I do service?
If you, for example, for goods, we don't measure service. Even in Brazil, if we are certifying a Brazilian supplier in the methodology of ANP Resolution 19, it's not measured service. In any case, any equipment, we don't measure the service, okay? For goods. But for deduct service from service, I believe we were talking about service abroad from service in Brazil. We don't know why ANP didn't state that on the resolution, but it's being discussed. It probably will be, I believe it will be approved. I'm not sure, but hopefully will be approved and will be able to be deducted. Now, what is possible to deduct is the service from Brazil, like I mentioned here. One second, here. We can deduct the service, Brazilian service from a system. For example, if the EPC from the hire the Brazilian service straight from Brazil, the Brazilian service, if it's hired directly, it can be deducted, okay? But if the FPSO or the module constructor hire a foreign service that subcontracts a Brazilian service, even if it's intercompany, we cannot deduct because it's not defined on the resolution.
So, like
there is no reason why, but it's being discussed on the agency public consultation. Okay.
No, it was very clear then. I think if I understood right, if you are like a module constructor in Singapore and you buy like a computer and you hire a computer modeling company in Brazil to do some CFD modulation, then you can deduct this and then you have local content this. But if you are like a CFD, like a computer modeling company in Singapore and you hire to do part of the modeling a Brazilian company, then there is no local content, cannot deduct this. But they are discussing this right now, and then it might change this in the future. I think we are close to the end, like we have 2 minutes now. And so, I mean, any other questions you guys may have, you can just send us an email, and then we can have a one-to-one meeting with you guys. I think most of you already know us, so it will be a pleasure to meet you guys again online, and pretty soon, I mean, to meet you in offline, you know, if you're here in Brazil or if we come there to visit.
Hopefully, I can visit you all on your countries soon.
So, Marina, any final words? Guilherme, any final words?
Thank you all for hearing me today. I hope I could explain a little bit more about the resolution and clarify your questions. You all have my contact. Please feel free to contact me anytime you need. If you need my number, you can email me and I will give you my number. You can call me anytime as well. Thank you all. Have a good night there for some, and good morning to some as well. Okay.